everyone, it's me Oля here. You're welcome to my channel. Today we are going to only talk about conjugation of Ukrainian verbs in the present tense, and there will be a lot of information, so I decided to stay away from other tenses, and we will talk about them more in details in the next videos. So in Ukrainian we have two conjugations of two types, and each conjugation has different types of verbs inside of it, and there will be, details you need to know about conjugating each of these types of verbs. So first conjugation has 4 types of verbs, and the second conjugation will have 5 types of verbs, and about each type we are going to talk right now. So without further ado, let's start learning. And with every type of verb we will have the same algorithm. We will take the infinitive, we will remove something from infinitive, we will be left with the stem, and for each of this stem we are going to add endings which are going to be specific for almost each of the groups that we are going to talk about. Type 1. We take the verb in the infinitive, remove ty, we will have the stem. The stem will end in a vowel. And type 1 will include verbs like мати, відповідати, кохати, розуміти, чекати, and so on. For instance, мати, as I told you, we remove ty and we will have the stem. So мати, remove ty, the stem will be ма. Now we must add the following endings. For я, the ending will be ю. Ти єш. Він, вона, воно є. Ми ємо. Ви єте. Вони ють. Let's try. Мати, again we removed ти. We are now left with the stem ма. To this stem we are going to attach the endings that I just told you about. So, я маю, ти маєш, він, вона, воно має, ми маємо, ви маєте, вони мають. Let's take another verb of type 1, for instance, кохати, to love. We must remove ти, we are left with коха. Коха is the stem. Now we are adding endings. Я кохаю, ти кохаєш, він, вона, воно кохає, ми кохаємо, ви кохаєте, вони кохають. Let's take another verb of this type, слухати, to listen. We remove ти, we are left with слуха. It ends in a vowel a, слуха. So let's add ending. Я слухаю, ти слухаєш, він, вона, воно слухає, ми слухаємо, ви слухаєте, вони слухають. Type 2. Drop ending вати and receive the stem. Here we have such verbs as будувати, готувати, подавати, пояснювати, продавати. So this verb must end in вати, so we could remove вати from it. Makes sense. For instance, будувати, we remove вати, we are left with the stem буду. Готувати, remove вати, the stem would be готу. Now, good news, the endings for the verbs of type 2 would be same as for type 1. Let's try. Будувати, remove вати, we will have the stem буду. Let's add endings. Я будую, ти будуєш, він, вона, воно будує. Ми будуємо, ви будуєте, вони будують. Let us take another verb of type 2, готувати, to cook. We remove вати and we are left with готу. Let's add endings. Я готую, ти готуєш, він, вона, воно готує, Ми готуємо, ви готуєте, вони готують. However, some verbs of type 2 keep the va in the stem, so we just remove ти. These are the following verbs. Забувати, співати, вбивати. They don't lose va, they keep it. For instance, to sing, співати, we only remove ти, we keep va. And we will have the following. Я співаю, ти співаєш, він, вона, воно співає, ми співаємо, ви співаєте, вони співають. Type 3. We must drop ending ути, and we are left with a stem that usually ends in a consonant. For instance, we have verbs like гинути, вибухнути, сохнути, тиснути. For instance, let's take the verb сохнути, which means to dry out. We would remove ю. We remove ути and we are left with the stem. Сохнути minus ути. The stem will be сохн. However, this time we are going to have different set of endings, not the ones that we used for type 1 and 2. For type 3, the endings would be following. Я, у, ти, еш, він, вона, воно, ми, емо, ви, ете, вони, уть. Okay, we figure out that for сохнути, the stem would be сохн. Let's try adding the endings. Я сохну, ти сохнеш, він, вона, воно сохне, ми сохнемо, ви сохнете, вони сохнуть. Let's try another verb. For instance, тиснути. Тиснути means to press. So we remove ути and we are left with the stem тисн. Тиснути minus ути would be тисн. And that's our stem to which we are adding endings. Я тисну, ти тиснеш, він, вона, воно тисне, ми тиснемо, ви тиснете, вони тиснуть. And the last type for conjugation 1 is type 4. In this type, we drop ending ти, but the stem of the verb changes. Here we will have such verbs as жити, хотіти, іти, писати, казати. And I told you that here when we remove the ending, the stem is going to change. So what kind of change will happen to a stem? Let's see. Жити, живу, хотіти, хочу, іти, іду, писати, пишу, казати, кажу. So you see that there is one consonant that changes in the stem when we remove the ending. The endings for the verbs of type 4 of the first conjugation are the same that are for types 3. For instance, let us take the verb жити, means to live, and the stem, after we remove ти, would be not жит, but жив, because of the change of the stem. Let's add endings. Я живу, ти живеш, він, вона, воно живе, ми живемо, ви живете, вони живуть. Let's take another verb. Хотіти means to want. We remove ти and we are end with хоті, but there is the change in the stem. We agreed on that, and the change would be хоч. Let's try adding endings. Я хочу, ти хочеш, він, вона, воно хоче, ми хочемо, ви хочете, вони хочуть. Now we are finally reaching conjugation 2, the second conjugation, in which we will have 5 types of verbs. And for verb type 1, we are going to need to remove іти in order to receive the stem. The stem will usually end in a consonant such as ж, ч, ш. For instance, here we have such verbs as служити, бачити, значити, basically those that end in іти. But also in this category falls the verb мовчати, to keep silence, мовчати, although it ends in ати. So, for instance, бачити minus ити, we will have бач. It will be the stem. Значити means to mean. We remove ити, we will be left with знач. It will be the stem. Now we must add endings, and the endings for conjugation to verb type 1 would be the following. Я, у, ти, іш, він, вона, воно, ить, ми, імо, ви, ите, вони, ать. For instance, to see, бачити, remove ити, we are left with бач, it's our stem. Now we are adding endings. Я бачу, ти бачиш, він, вона, воно бачить. Ми бачимо, ви бачите, вони бачать. Let's take a verb мовчати to keep silence. Here we will need to remove ати because that's kind of exception. And after we remove it, we are going to be left with a stem мовч. So after we add endings, we are going to have the following. Я мовчу, ти мовчиш, він, вона, воно мовчить, ми мовчимо, ви мовчите, вони мовчать. Verb type 2. For verbs type 2, we are going to need to remove iti or iti in order to receive the stem. And the stem will be the same for each person except for the first singular. For the first singular, there will be a change in the stem, and I will tell you now what kind of change it will be. In this type, we have such verbs as ходити, носити, чистити, радити, їздити. Now, endings are going to be the same that we have for type 1. And I told you that they're going to be a change for the first person singular in the stem. What kind of change it will be? So, ходити, ходжу, носити, ношу, чистити, чищу, радити, раджу, їздити, їжджу. That's the kind of change that the stem will have in the first person singular. For the rest of the persons and the numbers, singular and plural, the ending would be standard. We remove iti or iti and have the stem. Okay, now let's try adding endings. To walk, ходити, я ходжу, remember about the change. Ти ходиш, він, вона, воно ходить, ми ходимо, ви ходите, вони ходять. To advise, to give advice. Радити. Remember about the change for the first person singular. Я раджу. For the rest, the stem is standard. Ти радиш, він, вона, воно радить, ми радимо, ви радите, вони радять. Type 3. In order to receive the stem, we must drop iti. The end will end in a consonant, usually in a hard consonant r. For instance, курити, варити, творити, морити. Basically, those verbs must end in riti, so we can end iti and we'll have the stem that ends in r. For instance, to boil, варити, we remove iti, we are left with the stem var. Творити, to create, remove iti, we are left with the stem tvor. Now we must add the endings. What kind of endings we will have for type 3? Let's see. Я, ю, ти, іш, він, вона, воно, ить, ми, імо, ви, ите, вони, ять. Let's try. Варити, to boil, we have the stem var. Я варю, ти вариш, він, вона, воно варить, ми варимо, ви варите, вони варять. To create, творити, we figured that the stem is твор. Let's add endings. Я творю, ти твориш, він, вона, воно творить, ми творимо, ви творите, вони творять. Now verbs type 4. For type 4, we must remove iti, iti, the endings, if we want to receive the stem. The stem will end in consonants that we call labial, that are created with the help of lips, such as m, b, v, p, f. And here is a detail I must mention if we want to stay grammatically correct. The stem for type 4 for all persons and all numbers, plural and singular, will be the same with two exceptions. First person singular and third person plural. In these two persons, we must add l in the end of the stem. Now you are going to see how it happens. At least I have some good news for you. The endings would be same as for type 3. Here we have such verbs as любити, економити, терпіти. So let's take the verb to save, економити. We remove iti. We are left with the stem ekonom. But we remember that for singular first person and third person plural, we must add l in the end of the stem ekonom. It will be економл. Let's try and see. Я економлю. Ти економиш, він, вона, воно економить, ми економимо, ви економите, вони економлять. Also in this category falls the verb to sleep, спати. We remove ати, even though the rule tells us that we must remove iti or iti, but that's the exception. And let's see how it works for the verb to sleep, спати. We have the stem sp. We remember about L for the first person singular and the third person plural. Я сплю, ти спиш, він, вона, воно спить, ми спимо, ви спите, вони сплять. And finally, we are on the last type of verbs, of the last type of conjugation, which is second. Here, for this type, the ending yiti must be removed if we want to receive the stem. A stem will end in a vowel. Here we have verbs like доїти, коїти, клеїти, гоїти. And also in this category falls the verb стояти. Type 5 will have its own set of endings. Let's see what they are. Я, ю, ти, їж. Він, вона, воно, їдь. Ми їмо, ви їте, вони їдять. For instance, коїти, to make something happen, to do something with a bad connotation. Like, що ти накоїв? What have you done? Like, that has a negative meaning. If we remove їти, we are left with the stem, ко, ends in a vowel, like I told you. Let's try and see how it works with the endings. Я кою, ти коїш, він, вона, воно коїть, ми коїмо, ви коїте, вони коять. And let's take the word exception, стояти. We remove яти, even though the rule is telling us to remove їти, but that's exception. And let's see how it works with endings. Я стою, ти стоїш, він, вона, воно стоїть. Ми стоїмо, ви стоїте, вони стоять. That's it. Finally, we have reached the end of this video, which I hope was useful. Also want to remind you that I have a Patreon and now you can support my channel if you feel like supporting it. So hopefully with your help I can make videos more often, and in the future, if everything goes well, hopefully I can improve the quality of the video and the sound, and we are going to learn much better. It was all I wanted to tell you for now about the conjugation of the verbs in the present tense in Ukrainian. As you understand, we have two conjugations, I'm showing four, it's two conjugations, and each of them has different types inside. First one has 4 types, second one has 5 different types of verbs, and they there are some, rules that each type has to follow. Hope this one was clear for you. If you still have any questions, do not hesitate and leave them down below. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in my next videos. Bye!